Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday night. I have to think of a catchphrase that isn't Super Tuesday. So yes, this is going to be the new time for doing it. We're moving from Wednesdays to Tuesdays. And so because we did the last stream on Sunday, I had to go to a customer's house yesterday for some social distance picking up of trees and things like that. There's not been a massive amount of time to sort of do a huge amount of preparation for today. And so it's going to be a bit raw. It's going to be even rawer than I planned because I had set up my iPhone camera and everything to work. And now it's not working, so that's awesome. Half an hour it was, left it to charge, and now it's not working. So hopefully we're coming through loud and clear, as per usual. If any problems with that, just I can guarantee you that they'll get answered at some point. And so what this is designed to be is kind of like that, just introduction into what Satsuki azaleas are. And their kind of intricacies, the things that make them very different to other species that we use for bonsai, and just kind of like just cover a lot of the bases that need to be covered before we start going in and actually looking at some of the techniques for styling, techniques for pruning back hard, techniques for pruning back weakly, and things like that. So it's just a general kind of like overall kind of like grand view of what Satsukis are. There will be a lot of, like I say, kind of like a number of streams on this. I've got plenty of material to do. Some of them will be kind of like quite brutal cutbacks. Some of them will be kind of trying our best to stop a tree from dying, and things like that. So there'll be kind of like a lot in between. So the one thing that I do know about in the bonsai world is azaleas, and kind of like we'll actually look at one of the reasons why that is, because the organisation of the Japanese bonsai world is very different, and when it comes to sort of azaleas and the sort of the standard bonsai across in the West here, we tend to lump them all together. But in Japan, they're very much kind of like separated up into different associations, and different growers, and different aesthetic ideas and things like that. My master, Mr. Kobayashi, the chief, he started his career in the Satsuki bonsai world, and he got into that via his father, who was a flower grower, and so they used to grow potted plants and sort of sell them at fairs and do all sorts of crazy things, and they still do a little bit of that today. The area where the nursery was famous back in the day for being a kind of a commercial nursery type area, and there's still a few of those nurseries kind of producing small amounts of flowers and things there today. But anyway, so the chief kind of graduated through horticultural kind of college and went into the family business, and saw that what his father was doing wasn't particularly profitable, and wanted to move into something that was a bit more kind of for the amount of effort and the space that they had, that was a lot more profitable. And at that time, and so this is kind of 60s and 70s really, Japan was really kind of like going through a boom period in terms of sort of disposable income and people sort of pursuing hobbies, and we see a massive increase in the pursuit of bonsai, Suiseki, Satsuki, all of these type of things during that period. Sort of coming out of that post-war period where things were very, very tough. The economy in the 60s and 70s starts to pick up. There's a lot more money going around in Japan, and obviously hobbies kind of become a big thing. And we see this huge increase in the popularity of bonsai, the popularity of Suiseki, kind of after the Olympics in 1964, and then the World Expo in 1970. Those were two kind of like big like massive events that kind of really kick-started the interest in all of these things in Japan. And so during that sort of 70s period, the explosion of the Satsuki bonsai world was just phenomenal. Lots of different varieties were being hybridized. People were growing trees. People were buying trees for incredible amounts of money. Now, the history of azaleas goes back a long way in Japan. They were grown as garden plants, and then they were kind of appreciated as in the same way that they are today, for a lot of their different varieties. So there had been this massive sort of history of that. There was a very good book, very interesting book, called A Brocade Pillow, if you're interested in such thing, which is kind of like a history of azaleas. Not just the Satsuki azaleas, but also sort of other varieties. Because azalea is basically just the general term for rhododendron. The ones that we mainly deal with in the bonsai world, and that I'm going to be talking about, are the Satsuki azaleas. But yeah, there's this sort of long history of that. But going into kind of like the modern history, which is all we're really kind of like mainly interested in. During that sort of 70s period, there was a huge increase in the interest, and things like there were cuttings being sold for like £100 back in the day, when £100 was a lot of money. There was just crazy stories, and there was just this huge demand for azaleas, for azalea bonsai. Everybody wanted to have them, and the number of people pursuing it was just phenomenal. And so that was kind of during that kind of like massive bubble period, was where the chief kind of got interested in it purely from a kind of like a profitability sort of aspect. And then once he started working with them, he realised that it chimed with him, and he kind of like began to follow the azaleas a lot more. And then through that, he got into bonsai, and he became the man that we all know and love today. But he kind of got into the azaleas from that perspective. And so his first 20 years of his career was sort of really based in the azalea world, and he still to this day is very kind of like deeply entwined with the azalea world. And so Shunkaien, the garden that I apprenticed at, not so much now, but definitely when I was an apprentice, which was back in the dark old days, 2002 to 2010, 12-ish. There was a lot more azaleas there than there are now. I would say at least a third of the trees that we had in the nursery were Satsuki azaleas, whereas if you go to, say for example, Mr. Kimura's, then there would be maybe 2 trees out of 2,000. If you went to Mansaien, which is one of the Saburo Kato's garden, was 5th generation, 6th generation, or whatever it is now, bonsai nursery, they would have maybe 2 or 3. There's just not that sort of crossover period. That sort of crossover of the species just doesn't exist. If you went to a Satsuki grower, a specialist Satsuki grower, you might find 2 or 3 other species of bonsai. And so the division between the growers, it has always been very, very distinct. And Mr. Kobayashi and a few other people, there were a couple of others, was one of those people who did both. And so my apprenticeship was quite heavily based on, there was a lot of azaleas, azalea work there, and so I had my fingers in 2 pies, so to speak. And I had a lot of experience with those, whether I liked it or not. And so this is the one thing that I do know about. So a little bit more than other people. So if you were kind of like playing a game of top trumps of bonsai professionals around the world, Western bonsai professionals, and my card came up, then you would definitely be playing the Satsuki knowledge card with me, and then you would win every time. But that's nothing really to be kind of like that massively proud of, because it is a very weird and niche world, and it's full of kind of like really geeky, obsessive type of knowledge and concepts and things like that, which we're going to kind of like look into. And one of the reasons why a lot of people maybe don't like azaleas is as a bonsai species is because of that weird niche aspect to it, and there's kind of like a lot of areas that people maybe don't understand. Understanding those requires a certain kind of like level of interest, and taking it to that kind of like super nerdy, geeky level that appeals to a lot of people, kind of like definitely in Japan, but that type of sort of collective mentality, it does open the world to a lot more kind of interest and depth. However, if you just want to kind of like have a couple of them around, then understanding some kind of like basic concept about them is all that really needs to go. But if you want to sort of go down that rabbit hole, it really does kind of add a lot more interest to them. So looking at it from the outside, you might think, oh, it's really boring, they all kind of look the same, which to a certain extent they do. There is a lot of kind of similarity with a lot of the trees, but there's reasons for that. And so one of the big kind of concepts with Satsuki bonsai, and one that you can take and understand and then apply it to other species and other aspects of bonsai, is that you are comparing like with like, and you're not comparing one variety with another. Realistically, you want to be sort of looking at them as examples of that one variety. You're looking at them as, is this a good Issho no Haru? Is this a good Hoshi no Kagayaki? Not, why is this Hoshi no Kagayaki so thin compared to this Osakazuki? There's just the varieties fulfilled completely different kind of like criteria and completely different roles within the Satsuki world, and so understanding that is kind of a key thing. We will talk about a little bit about that, but sort of getting back to that kind of like division in Japan. We see this with not only the Satsuki world, but also the Shohin world. So a lot of the kind of the things that we're sort of talking about sort of do touch a little bit. There's kind of like, if you drew a Venn diagram, there's kind of like crossover in some concepts with the Shohin world, in the sense of the aesthetic is different. The things that they're looking at is very different, and such like. Let me just close the chat. So the organisation, the people who run the worlds are different, and the kind of the way they go about things ever so slightly sort of different. So there's basically kind of like three kind of major organisations within the bonsai. Or six, we should say, actually, within the bonsai sort of world, the community. There's like the Bonsai Association, and then there's the Bonsai Professionals Growers Association. And so one is run by essentially the enthusiasts, for the enthusiasts, and they're the people who run the kokufu, for example. Then there's the Professionals Union, which is a kind of like the governing body for professionals, and they run like auctions. They do. They run an exhibition for professionals only, and they sort of have. It's an organisation for professionals, whereas the other one is mainly for amateurs. And so if you exhibit, for example, at Kokufuten, the national exhibition there, you have to be a member of that. And then within the Satsuki world, there is the same thing. There is a professionals association and an enthusiasts kind of overall association, and then there are regional associations and organisations that run their own exhibitions, and each sort of different association, like within the Satsuki world, like these kind of like different regional associations can have ever so slightly different kind of like criteria, categories when it comes to exhibiting. So exhibiting azaleas is one of the biggest kind of key features of doing them in Japan. The enthusiasts that do it basically they do it to show off their trees. They're taking them to exhibitions and sort of showing them off, and to a certain extent competing is a very kind of like important part of it. And we were very, very busy around this sort of late May, early June time, when there were lots and lots of different exhibitions. I used to drive up to an area about 2 hours north of Tokyo called Kanuma, which you may know from the soil. It comes from that area, and this is kind of like the mecca for Satsuki azaleas in Japan. There are a few other areas, different areas of Japan, where there's a lot of sort of some concentrations of Satsuki growers, but this is like where most of them were going. And there was an association, there was exhibitions that happened in Kanuma, and then there was another one that happened in Utsunomiya, which is a city just 10 miles away. And they had different organisations, they had different, ever so slightly different criteria, and things like this. So it was all very kind of like people worrying about these tiny little details to fit into all of these different categories for awards and things like that. So it's a really kind of like strange way of kind of being organised. But that was part of the appeal for it, for a lot of people. And so again, it was that kind of like judging, like with like. So there were, for example, you will often see a number of sort of trees such as this, quite thin trunk trees. Got another one here. Oh, caught up with the cable. It isn't working. There we go. Another one like this. Okay, and this type of very thin trunk tree. This thin trunk had its own kind of special category, and each category had size. So there would be 2 centimetre thickness trunks, 4 centimetre thickness trunks, 6 and 8. And then there would be prizes for all of them. So basically, everyone was a winner towards the end. There were so many different kind of awards and things that went out. It was everyone kind of did. There was all these different areas where people could kind of like aim for. And so that idea of sort of like trunk thickness was very, very sort of important. And so if you could find a tree, for example, like this, which had a trunk thickness of 5 centimetres, so it wasn't in the 4 centimetre category, wasn't in the 6 centimetre category, then it could actually be relatively inexpensive. If you had a shohin tree, for example, the size categories at Kanuma were say 20 and 30 centimetres. So if you had one that was 27 centimetres, for example, it wasn't ever really going to compete against things in the 30 centimetre category, and so it would be really quite cheap, inexpensive because of that. It was this really kind of weird and obscure kind of value systems and ideas and concepts within them. But you see that type of mentality and approach with things like orchids, with people who collect cacti and all that kind of stuff. So it moves more towards that kind of collector mentality rather than kind of the art and design and aesthetics of trees that we tend to see with bonsai. And I think the best kind of example of this is the kind of like the concept of a flower tower, which, if you're from Northern Ireland, is sounds completely different. So I hope all of you, I hope Ian is at the home there saying flower tower, because they're those trees which are basically this just giant sort of cylinder of flowers. We've got some. I've got a picture of one here. We'll just sort of put that up just so you kind of know what we're talking about. So this type of tree, okay, and there are a number of varieties of azaleas which are only suitable for that sort of type of growth. And so if you are sort of judging that type of tree on an aesthetic basis, like, okay, we're looking at the design of it, we're looking at making it something with dramatic movement or anything like that, you are literally barking up the wrong tree. It's just smashing your head against a brick wall, because its growth habit is not designed to do anything other than look like that. It's never going to be anything. You're never going to develop a thick trunk, you're never going to develop thick branches. All it's ever designed to do, it's been bred specifically to look like that. Okay, and so there are a number of varieties which are specifically kind of like only suited to that. You may or may not have seen this book. This is a dictionary of varieties. All of these different varieties of azaleas. And these are just some of the ones that have been registered. There are over like 3,000 varieties. There's about 1,000 of them that have been registered, and by that we mean registered with one of those different organisations. And the reason for kind of like having to register them is to sort of claim ownership of them, and to kind of claim a hereditary, so you know the kind of the hereditary path of those different varieties. So looking at this, there's kind of all this different information about sort of the name, the type of flower, where it comes from, the breeding and such, like when it was registered, who registered it, growth habit. All of this kind of information is held in this book, which is in Japanese, and very impenetrable for most people, even myself. But so it's kind of like that registration of those flowers, so that everybody knows what they are, so they know what a good variety of that's a difficult one to pronounce, Kobai Nishiki. So everyone knows what Kobai Nishiki should look like. Okay, and it gives you kind of like the opportunity to kind of compare against it. And so we've got like I just did a couple of the ones that we've got here to sort of show. Let me just put the microphone on this. I forgot to do that. Trust. Okay, here we go. Boom. Sorry. Okay, so you should be able to hear me and see this one. So this is the one that's sort of directly behind me. This is a Yata no Kagami, which is a really kind of old variety. Obviously, you can't really sort of see what like the kind of the purity of those flowers just yet, because the flowers are kind of like yet to open. This one is Issho no Haru. Again, the flowers on this one is just a little bit kind of late to open up, but you can sort of see some of the flower types definitely kind of sort of poking their way through there. And so obviously the mixture of all these different sort of flower types. Okay, and this one, which is completely just green because it didn't flower at all, and we'll talk about that later. Akimi no Tsuki should look like that, but sadly it doesn't. There were hardly any flowers on that. There's a reason for this, but yeah, so it's a good way of it's the way in which the Satsuki world kind of have this not necessarily like a rule system, but a way of defining what the varieties are and what they should look like. And if you're going to one of these exhibitions, the variety that you have has got to be registered. There are, as I said, there's over 3,000 varieties. There's about 1,000 of them that are registered, so there's 2,000 of them just sort of floating around that aren't registered. And quite a lot of those do actually kind of like come across to Europe and such like, because they're relatively inexpensive, because of their value in Japan is lower because you can't exhibit them. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might not want to register a variety. Perhaps the flowers are not stable and over time, and things like this, because the crossbreeding of all these different varieties can, it takes a while to develop a really good sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like the purity of the flowers, and something that's not going to degrade over time. And so with some varieties, you see this sort of degradation of the flower. And a lot of people's questions have come. A lot of people have a lot of questions like, "Oh, last year it was pink, or last year it was this, and then this year it's not." And there's a certain amount of kind of like genetics to that, and there is a certain amount of horticultural practice, particularly in terms of fertilization and sunlight levels. But as I said, there's this kind of like genetic predisposition to reverting back to kind of like a type over time. For some varieties, that time frame might be very, very long. For others, it might be really short, and so that's kind of like one of the reasons why some varieties get used and registered and why some don't. I hope this isn't really boring for everybody. But one kind of that I have spoken about in the past, and one that's quite common, is the Kinsai. Okay, Kinsai is a beautiful variety to use. It's a very old variety. It's been around for a long time. It's featured in that book that I showed earlier, Azaleas of Old Japan, a brocade pillow. It's featured in there, and it's been around for a while. And it has this beautiful kind of it should be a lot more fingered, but it's kind of like firework like flower that comes out, and if it's really really good, it should have like about 11 sort of firework kind of like type petals. However, over time, if you're not careful and you don't kind of work on the branches and maintain that sort of genetic purity of the branches, then what tends to happen is one of the parent types tends to to overpower like the other ones, and so this is called the lapa, which basically means trumpet type of flower, and that's one of the parent, the mother. So there's the two different varieties, kind of get crossbred together in order to create a beautiful child, which occasionally does happen. Believe me, and obviously we've got some of the genetic characteristics of both. This is the tree in question, not quite in full flower, but so it's got some of the genetic characteristics of both, and you can start to see over time that certain branches will kind of like revert to type, and a lot of this, as I said, can be due to genetics. A lot of it can be down to poor practice, and a lot of it could be down to poor fertilizing. And what you tend to see, if those big flower-like, the trumpet-like leaves, flowers don't get kind of like thinned out and removed, then over time the kind of like the disease, the influence sort of spreads to other branches, and it's this really strange kind of hormonal way of kind of reverting back to type, and there's the hormonal kind of responses and interactions within azaleas are very very important, and this is where that kind of the changes of colour of flowers and things like that can come into play. A lot of it is sort of due to sunlight and things like that, but the kind of like the flowering pathways and the hormonal responses to what's going on in the tree are kind of like really quite important. We'll sort of talk about that a little bit later. Where was I coming from that? Oh, so yeah, so sort of looking at those types of flowers and things like that. And so when people are looking at Satsuki exhibitions, and as I said, there's many of them in the sort of the flowering time. A lot of the judgment is based upon that kind of like the purity of flowers. So going back to our Floritar, there is like this is a very good example of this variety. I think it's Aska, which one of my favourites. And so this kind of the distribution of the colours is really really good. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because they're still kind of like in blocks there. But you can see there's a good sort of variety of all of those different colours, and across the tree there's a good sort of balance. But again, they're in sort of slight blocks, which is a bit of a negative. And so this would be sort of like maybe sort of 75 out of 100 points for that kind of beautiful kind of flower distribution. As I said, it's a very geeky and obsessive world, and there were people who were very very good at at getting the flowers to all come out at the same time, getting them to be perfectly distributed and things like that. They were obsessive about it, and you could tell the difference between those people's work and people who didn't put their effort in. I don't know that much about it. I just know what's good and what's bad. And so here's an example of one that isn't quite so good. I forget the variety of this, but you can see there quite a poor distribution of all those different colours. This is another one where we have got, this technically isn't that sort of like real pure flower tower type of construction. This has a little bit more of a bonsai like feel to it, but that sort of very poor distribution of the flowers, that one branch up in the top corner there, which is all this type of flower, would be kind of like a really massive sort of demerit point for that tree. So that would be like, say, only 50 points out of 100. This one would be even worse because of the the predominance of the white. Okay, and so that's where it becomes really quite difficult to kind of get into and be penetrate in for people who only have a passing interest in them. Those people who love it, who go in for that, go deep into it and are obsessive, and they know all the varieties off by heart. They it's just crazy, and it is all about that kind of like judging like with like, and so, for example, sort of understanding that a lot of that is really important. So looking at, I'm supposed to have my camera here and sort of show some close-ups and things like that. This is some pictures of the sort of professionals exhibition, and so this is a tree that won the exhibition. This was by Mr. Kobayashi, and this is a very, very good example of it as a variety. This was Momochidori, which is a really kind of unusual and rare variety related to Osakazuki, but also as a structure, also as a bonsai itself. So that had both kind of like interesting kind of like rarity as the species, and also kind of like this great kind of aesthetic design principles. But then if you look at some of the other pictures sort of going through, okay, for most people they would just sort of look at that one and not be like massively impressed. Oh, it's like, yeah, it looks okay, but for that variety, it's a phenomenal one. Oh, I forgot what the name of that one is in the moment. It'll come back to me. And the same thing, where was that little one? Should have put post-it notes in here. Right, that just looks like any other tree. Right, but that's 20 centimeters tall, and the variety of that Wakai ibis, to get something that small, that scale free, is just absolutely outstanding. It's just phenomenal work. The same could be said for this one. Okay, Setsunaka no Matsu. It's just they're normally Shohin mame sized trees. Got these weird kind of rounded leaves. This is a 48 centimeter massive thick trunk, twin trunk specimen in a tiny shallow pot, and it's just like, you look at that and it's just a phenomenal piece of work for that. Aesthetically and from like a design perspective, comparing it to bonsai, it's all over the place. The branch on this side is way too long. Movement of the tree going across to one side, the second trunk going across the other side. It's just the direction of the apex is all. It's just messed up. But from that kind of rarity of the species, it's just like, bravo, well done. Never seen another one like it. And what you tend to find within the Satsuki world is there isn't as much importance attached to that kind of design, and the kind of what they look like sort of structurally. They are exhibited, as you sort of saw with the professionals exhibition. They used to hold it in November, then they held it in January. Now they hold it in right at the end of March. They keep shifting it around because nobody goes to it. They just but yeah, so it's basically sort of they're exhibited out of a flower, and so you're just kind of like looking at the structure of them. So where I was going with that? So yeah, it's not so much. There's much less kind of importance attached with a lot of the sort of the design principles. So when you're looking at that kind of information from Japan, there's that massively different viewpoint that you have to kind of try and get your head around a little bit when you're looking at those pictures and evaluating them from a Western kind of bonsai perspective, and sort of thinking about judging them compared to a maple, or judging it compared to a pine tree and things like that. So it does require, as I said, that kind of little bit of extra knowledge, and it is very, very difficult to kind of get that without having without going to Japan or speaking Japanese or kind of getting into them in a big way. There's not that many people, as I said, that do it in the West. There's been a few people publish some books and kind of like make efforts. Mark Bowens in Belgium, he partnered up with one of the biggest exporters in Kanama, a guy called Kobayashi Sango, who's I work very closely with as well, a number of years back, and they started doing lots and lots of kind of exhibitions there and things like that, but it didn't end very well for various different reasons. But I remember going along there and sort of doing something and meeting up with them and stuff like that. And there's been a few areas where people are really sort of trying to sort of push it forward, but it hasn't sort of really sort of taken off in Europe for certain. As I got into that kind of like real deep level because of that kind of difficulty to kind of get knowledge. The only real book that's ever been sort of published on them was Floral Treasures of Japan by Alexander Kennedy, which for its time was a very, very good book. And there's some sort of very interesting information in there, and kind of goes over a lot of the things that we're sort of talking about in detail. So that, if you're interested, it's definitely worth kind of trying to pick that one up and just sort of reading it. But obviously that was, things have moved on a little bit, and people like myself and other people have been to Japan a lot more, and more knowledge is sort of coming back. So there's a lot of things in there that perhaps are not as applicable. And it's the same with anything. It's not saying that he was wrong or anything like that, because for its time it was a really, really good book. But I'll just say, that's just how things progress. If anyone's going to ask, I'm not writing a book on azaleas, not yet. I'm too busy with all this nonsense. So this is it. This is my book on azaleas. But yeah, it's one of those things that it's very kind of difficult to kind of penetrate into. As I said, like these books, they write the names in English, but that's it. In Roman script, but that's about it. And so I get loads and loads of people sending me pictures like, do you know what this variety is? Do you know what this is? It's just, it is hard to get the information. There's one magazine in Japanese called Gekkan Satsuki, which literally means monthly Satsuki. I feature in this every now and again. There's Mr. Akiyama. We did a number of photo shoots. I put a picture up of one on Discord earlier today. We did like loads of photo shoots. They always used to come around and make us do them because nobody else wanted to do them. There's a picture of me from 2012 looking really grumpy. Oh, where are we? There we go. Look at that. Couldn't really be any more grumpy with what's going on there. Still had a bit of hair there. So, but yeah. But then when you like flick through it, it's just tree after tree after tree after tree after tree. And if you're not into Satsuki azaleas and you can't read it, it all gets a bit boring very, very quickly. So, yeah, it's a different world entirely and altogether. But as I said, those people who like it, there's the chief. All three of us featured in that issue. Sorry. Yes. So yeah, we all feature. As I say, there's not a whole lot of information unless you speak Japanese, and a lot of it is just picture based. Even the articles in here are pretty much the same as they were back in 1970, because there isn't a whole lot changed apart from different diseases and pests and things come out. So the techniques that get applied to azaleas are pretty simple. The real difficulty with azaleas is the kind of the horticultural aspect of them, and this is where everybody sort of tends to fail. Sorry, I was just checking the chat there. Right. So the horticulture aspect is where people sort of tend to fail for various different reasons. And one of them is not understanding how azaleas grow relative to how sort of a lot of the other species that we work with in bonsai. In that azaleas aren't trees. They are shrubs which are supposed to grow in clump style forms, sending out lots and lots of shoots from a base, and just keep rejuvenating themselves. They're not supposed to put on wood like this. They're not supposed to become exposed roots like this. They're not supposed to become thick or anything like that. And so they are entirely man-made. It's entirely artificial, and everything about them is fake. And so when people come in and say, "Oh, this should look more natural," or "this should look like this," they're talking out of a position of not understanding what azaleas are and what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to look like this. But then a lot of trees that we work on in bonsai, olives for example, privets, they get kind of like sculpted into these very architectural forms because they have a certain type of growth habit which enables you to do it. And the growth habit of azaleas, it tends to be basally dominant, okay? And so when we look at beech, when we look at larch and spruce and all these kind of things where we talk about how kind of like apically dominant they are, talk about how they want to grow upwards, send all of their energy, all of their resources to the tips, for example. Azaleas tend to send a lot of their growth to the lower branches. This tree here is a little bit of an example, and we will look at this a bit later. But the top on this is a little bit on the weak side, whereas the bottom branches are a little bit stronger. Okay. And so that's one of the big kind of ideas of kind of like azaleas. But if the tree is healthy and happy, if the tree has been set up correctly from a root perspective, and there's been no kind of catastrophic events to that tree, then there's absolutely no need to consider the bottom of the tree and the top of the tree as being of any different weakness. Like for this tree here, the top is just as strong as the bottom. Okay. When a tree starts to become weakened, such as this one is on its way, then that consideration may come into play. And so understanding how they get weakened and how we keep them strong is something that's very important. And rejuvenation is fundamental part of the bonsai practice, as in rejuvenating branch tips, rejuvenating the roots, for deciduous trees, for maples, for pines, for junipers, for everything. We've always got to make sure that the tips of the roots and the tips of the branches are always young and growing a certain amount, depending on what we're trying to do aesthetically. And horticulturally, some varieties will withstand, particularly the conifers, particularly those conifers that grow in very harsh environments. They will withstand very little incremental year-on-year growth. However, azaleas will not. If you restrict an azalea too much, if you do not rejuvenate the tips, if you don't let it grow, if you don't keep making it grow, similar to the idea that we were sort of trying to discuss a little bit in the Zelkova stream about making the tree work, defoliating it to make it work. If we don't do that with azaleas on a very short time scale, then things go very, very wrong very, very quickly. And so most people's problems with azaleas, or one aspect of people's problems, will have come from that sort of inability to cut back hard. That's scared to sort of cut back. I can and I will be cutting the crap out of azaleas in upcoming streams, and they will bounce back. I could entirely defoliate certain trees that I have in the garden here, and they will bounce back. Okay, if I came in and defoliated this one, and cut this one back hard, then there is a very high probability that this will not be able to rejuvenate itself, not be able to kind of like kick itself back into growth. because this hasn't been worked on properly over the last couple of years. Okay, it's also not had its flowers taken off, but we'll look at that in a second. But one of the ways we can sort of look at that and understand that is by looking at the branch tips. Okay, and I've got some pictures of both of these two trees here. Okay, so this is the branch tip of the weakened tree. You can still see the flowers yet to be properly removed there. The petals have been removed, but the seed head remains. But if you look at those branches, you'll notice that they are very kind of like brownish all the way out to the tip, kind of like lignified. Okay, so there's another shot of that one. Okay, when you look at it, it doesn't feel as though they're very vigorous. This is the Untitled that's behind me. And you look at those branch tips there, they're all long, beautiful green, fleshy, brand new, all last year's growth. Okay, you look at that and you see vibrancy. You just see it brimming full of energy. Okay, it's just working hard. Okay, so this is the youthful ones, light, it's, you know, youthful and flexible all the way out to the tips. Okay, that's this year's growth, by the way. So azaleas do send out their growth in the spring before they flower. Okay, this is the weak branch. There's hardly any extension from the spring, lignification all the way out to the tip. Okay, fade to black. Didn't want to do that. And so that rejuvenation of the tips is an absolutely fundamental key part of it. It keeps the tree working. It keeps the tree healthy. Keeps the tree photosynthesizing, it keeps everything going. And so on a fairly frequent basis, maybe on a 3-year cycle, 2-year cycle for some varieties, they need to be cut back hard, they need to be cut back to stimulate growth, to keep pushing it, to making sure those branch tips are healthy and strong. As I said, we will look at specific examples of that in streams coming up, but a lot of people's kind of problems arise from that. The other area that people's problems arise from is from the roots and messing around with the roots in a bad way. Again, we're going to do some summer repotting of azaleas because I've got plenty of them to do. It's not ideal to do repotting in the summer, but you can do it. But we'll look at some examples of that specifically. But basically, kind of like going in and messing with the root system directly underneath the trunk is a surefire way to cause you problems. That is where the weakness in the apex can often arise from. So water being it becomes sort of very difficult to penetrate into the core of the root ball to get into that area, or when trees have been repotted, turned it upside down, hacked away at that central core of the roots, and then caused the apex of the tree to go. Once it goes, it's gone. One of the things about azaleas, because they're not designed to look like this, they can't withstand stress. When the live veins become damaged and dried and desiccated, they die. And once certain varieties of azaleas, once they start to go, that's it, they're gone. Just put them on the burn pile, forget about it, because you'll never kind of get them back. Okay. Other varieties, Osakazuki for example, it's possible to have deadwood on them. It's possible for them to, because they're older, stronger, much more robust variety. But you know, other ones, once branch starts to go, that's it. It's just a slow spiral towards death. So making sure that kind of the root system is untouched in some areas, but touched on a fairly frequent basis in other areas. It sounds quite dirty, doesn't it, really? Is an important area, important aspect of bonsai. And so this tree here is a Yatta no Kagami, which is one of my favourite varieties. It's quite an old one. It's got a real kind of elegant flower, nice distribution of colours and things like that. Small leaf, good growth habit, and yeah, it's just a variety which kind of like whenever I was working with them, I always kind of liked them, and I like seeing them in exhibitions and such like. But this is really quite it's an almost a suicidal type of variety of azalea, in that the root system on this is even finer than some of the other varieties. Okay, Azalea roots are very, very fine. They have a very sort of fine hair-like nature to them. And this is, again, one of the reasons why Canema soil, so the specific soil type for azaleas, it's called Canema soil because it comes from Canema. Very sort of acidic. It's also but it's really the microporous structure of it that makes it so suitable for azaleas, because of the microporous nature of it, and it's really, really quite soft. The azalea roots can penetrate into it, hold on to it, and it works perfectly for them. Okay, so it's not just the pH of the soil, but it's the structure of it, because of their root structure, because of their fibrous, hairy roots, makes it really, really sort of ideal for them. However, because of that very sort of fibrous, hairy roots, particularly the Yatta no Kagami, the surface roots will die off very, very easily. You forget to water it, and those roots die off, or you kind of application of solid organic fertilizer really quite heavily could cause the surface to become crusty and the roots kind of like matte, and they form this really kind of like impenetrable surface layer, which makes it then difficult for water to get through. Azaleas being a massive water-loving species, you can't get water into the pot, into that central core, then they're gonna fail. And so a fairly frequent repotting regime is important, but only dealing with that kind of that surface layer and not going in and going up underneath the skirt into that central core and destroying it. Okay, so we can tickle around the edges, but not up underneath. That's one of the fundamental areas of azalea development. Somebody in the chat mentioned about things in America. So I'm not really looking at the chat because I'm just going on my stream of consciousness about stuff going to America. Azaleas are one of the few species that you can kind of import into America quite easily. Somebody mentioned the import bonsai company there. It was people I work with. Jonas over of Bonsai tonight. He's starting to import azaleas, and there's a few other people around that import azaleas into the United States. But they do have to get bare rooted, so the importation process in the United States is much more stressful. And so the azaleas get bare rooted, and they will withstand it to a certain extent as long as the aftercare on them is absolutely spot on. However, for a number of years afterwards, because they don't have that central core, you have to be super, super careful of not letting the top of the tree kind of like weaken and have any sort of stress to it, because if it does, it'll just go, and it'll just allow it to kind of like redevelop that sort of central core. As I said, we don't like to go in and touch them, okay, but if the tree is really strong and really healthy beforehand, gets pruned back hard, it can withstand that one kind of like invasive repotting once, but it takes 4, 5, 6 years for it to recover back up to sort of full health. And even then, because it's been messed around with that central root ball, you've always got that kind of like just a little bit of concern there. What else? Yeah, so that's kind of like, the basic ideas for repotting. That fairly sort of frequent cycle of it, touching the top, not going in and touching the bottom, and also ever so slightly over potting things. Okay, so azaleas like a slightly larger pot than other trees, cramming them into sort of super tight pots, which is why that one that I said that I showed you in there, in that sort of really shallow antique Chinese pot was very impressive. Lost it now, like that one there. That was like super impressive. Okay. However, that tree would have been taken out of that pot, put into something deeper immediately after that exhibition, because there was absolutely no way it would be able to sort of survive in that. One of the reasons why you see very, very few azalea rock plantings, because they don't like their roots to become excessively overheated. The only ones that you will tend to see that are on rocks are those real strong older varieties, You won't see any of the sort of a lot of the more hybridized and the weaker varieties as rock plantings. But they like that big deep pot. Partially because it's a massive water reservoir, partially because it's a heat sink, and you try to cram them into pots that are too small, then you end up with issues. One of the reasons why this tree was so weak was the previous pot was tiny, and the person who was looking after it found it difficult to water, and so degradation of health. So we're getting closer towards the hour mark. The only other thing really to sort of talk about, because I've just basically been talking non-stop for an hour. I could go on for another 3 if you actually wanted me to sit here and do it. That's how much of a nerd I am about the azaleas. Is the sort of the flower removal. This is something that is kind of an appropriate thing to be doing because the window of flowering for azaleas is quite wide. There are some early flower varieties, and particularly if we're talking about the non-Satsuki varieties. So some of the other ones they flower a little bit earlier in the season. Things like kurume, which I have zero experience with and not that much interest in. And some of the more garden centre varieties. Some people were asking about garden centre variety as doing them as azaleas. You can try, but I've never really seen any great examples of them. The only ones Ian Young has a really good one. I can't remember what variety it is, Ian. It's gone from me. But he'll put pictures up. Oh, you can find him on his Instagram, on his Facebook, and stuff like that. There are a few that you can do, but not many, because a lot of the garden centre varieties are designed to be big and bushy, and they're supposed to have that real big and kind of gorgeousness about them, and so their growth habit often isn't ideally suited towards bonsai cultivation. However, a lot of the bonsai varieties are often used in gardens and things like that, so if you pick the right variety you can get garden centre material that is suitable. It was the answer to that question. But realistically, I mean, azaleas are relatively inexpensive as trees. There are a number of people who do import them into various different places. Bonsai Plaza, for example, has a lot of very good in the Netherlands, but he sends all over Europe. He has a lot of very good azaleas, and other people, people mentioned in the UK and stuff like that. I sell them when I can be bothered. I bought this one to sell, but I don't want to get rid of it. I bought that one to never sell because it's just this tree here, this Issho no Haru, is sort of going back to about that kind of like the geekiness about varieties and things like that. Issho no Haru is traditionally quite a thick trunk, larger type of tree. You tend to see it as that because it's got massive leaves, it's got massive flowers, and so why somebody decided to make it into this exposed root styling, I have no idea. He must have been smoking some crazy leaves that morning, because it's just not suited for it. Just the tree itself just wobbles around all over that because of the sheer weight of the flowers and the leaves on top of it. And when I bought it, it was even bigger. It had like a massive section up at the top there, and it's just like, why would you do that? Why? What was your thought process there? I have no idea. And so when I saw it at Export Nursery in Japan, I was just like, I've got to have that because it's just ridiculous. And so yeah, that's kind of like why I did it. But yeah, so they are available and relatively inexpensive. I'm not promoting myself because I'm terrible at selling trees. But where was I going with it? I forgot now. But the one thing that, as all the different varieties and things like that, and the flowering. So the flowers are starting to on some of them are starting to finish on some of the early flowering varieties. So the Hoshi no Kagayaki, for example, the beautiful purple one that I really like, is beginning to finish. It's one of the early varieties. And so I did just a real sort of short video about how to remove the flowers. And so a lot of people will have them there. Okay, as long as you remove the flowers at the appropriate time, then that's the most important job at this time of year. You can do the pruning a little bit later, okay? And so you don't have to go out there, rush out there and start pruning things right now. As long as things get pruned by the middle of, say, late June, early July in the UK, Northern Europe type climates, you'll have plenty of time to get that second flush of growth to come through and set flowers for next year. You start doing it late July into August. You can even do it in September and October. I did this tree in October of last year. Still got a third flush of growth, but that's why it didn't have any flowers. So I deliberately kind of went through the kind of the intentional removal of the flowers for a reason there. We'll get onto that later. But the one thing that you kind of like do have to do quite quickly now, particularly with any tree that's weak, is to remove the flowers. So we'll just have a quick look at how you do that with this tiny little video here. It's the only one I had time to make today. Here we have a Hoshino Kagayaki, Chuhin Kifu size. And the flowers on this are about 70% kind of like opened and done. So what we're going to do is going to remove them. We're starting to see some that are beginning to fade. Okay, there's no exhibitions this year, obviously, and there's no need to keep the flowers on here for much longer. So what we'll do is we'll remove them to conserve some energy for the tree. So when we are looking at removing them, what we do is grasp the whole flower at the base and pinch off. Okay, don't just pull off the petals like this and leave the inner section of the flower like this, because that will turn to seed and tire the tree out. So just go through, nip them all off. So all of the flowers have been removed, and now it's time to look at the foliage. Now there's one thing that you'll notice about it, is that there's not very much of this new growth. Satsuki azaleas will send out their new growth in the spring, so you can see that new growth. It's the lighter green extensions at the tips there. And the top section here, as you can see, hasn't sent any of that out, whereas the lower sections have only sent out a little bit. Okay. This is due to a number of reasons, mainly me. In the sense that it wasn't repotted when it should have been. It grew about 3 years in that pot, needed to be repotted this spring but didn't. It also got left in the polytunnel for too long, and we also had a case of leaf gall, which has weakened the tree a little bit. Cleaned a few of them off, but we still have a few left on there, so it's weakened the tree just in general. As a result, it means we're not going to go through and do any massive hard pruning of this. The branch tips, which you can see here, they are still fairly youthful and vigorous, and so should be no problem to just leave it this year. We'll just fertilise it heavily, push that growth, and then look at doing it next year. So there's the kind of the flower removal sort of technique, and obviously that's not been done to this. And so you can see all of those, the central kind of the seed pods that are been left on the tree, whereas all the petals have kind of like dropped off earlier. Yeah, sorry about that, having the sound on. I don't know why that happened. Obviously I wasn't saying anything, so there we go. Yeah, so and that's one of the reasons why this tree will have weakened a little bit. Now there's one other big kind of misconceptions about azaleas, is that you should remove the flowers to sort of stop the wasting of energy. And the only time, or the only way in which you should be looking at not flowering, is when you're really pushing a lot of green growth and pruning late on in the season to get that second, third flush of growth. And so with this one, for example, this one got cut back immediately after flowering last year, so around about this time. We then had a second flush of growth, which was on its way to setting flower buds. Okay, so they were sort of starting to form, and I went in and I cut it back hard again. I was fertilising very heavily all the time, and then got a third flush of growth, which didn't have the time and didn't have the length of the growing season in order to set flower buds. Okay, if the tree has already spent a lot of the energy in setting the flower buds, and we get into the spring, and the tree is expecting to open its flower buds, and then you suddenly take them all off too early before they've even had the chance to open, then what you end up doing is you end up messing with the kind of all the hormonal responses that are going on, or the hormonal things that are going on in the tree, and it doesn't benefit the tree at all. You see a lot of people who remove the flowers far too early, or they remove the flowers, say in October, November, over the winter or something like that, without doing the pruning, without doing that excessive, like that heavy fertilizing and pushing it, and then you see the trees weaken and weaken and weaken. One of the trees, kind of like I did some consulting on in America that had happened, and another, it was just basically, all right, just let it flower, just feed it like crazy, water it like crazy, let it flower, let it do what it wants to do, let it go through its natural cycle, and then manage it afterwards. Once you start messing with that natural cycle, then things can start to kind of deteriorate. When you have a tree that's weakened, what you want to be doing is let the flowers begin to open, but take them off as soon as they're starting. You go in too early, take them off. It's not great. Okay. So that kind of having the flowers there is kind of like a driver for growth. It kind of causes them to go and things like that. Okay. So we will look very specifically at the pruning techniques of various different trees. So I mentioned it very briefly on the example here. Okay, so this was a little bit weakened, and as I said, the main reason for that was me. The main reason for all kind of problems with azaleas is generally you. That's the first reason. The second reason will be you, and then the third reason will be maybe something external. Okay, but generally it's down to user error from various different reasons, and so you have to kind of like, that's why the people who are very good at azaleas, they have that natural kind of touch for it, they have that green thumb, they know how horticulturally to keep them growing well and healthily, and that's bearing in mind the things that they really love: a lot of water, they like a lot of food. You've got to keep them going, you've got to keep them rejuvenated, both in the roots and in the branch tips. Okay, there are variations, there are slight differences between all of these little different varieties, but fundamentally that's something that you've got to have going with azaleas, which is why like the hedge pruning type of approach to them, that pushing them really hard, is one of the things that we really have to kind of look at and embrace within the Satsuki world. And so for people who like a lot of sort of delicate and very fine work, it seems very, very brutal. But it's about that having that massive kind of like ups and downs within the cycle. If you keep that going, then the trees sort of stay young and energetic and vigorous. Okay. So I think that's probably about as much as we want to kind of like cover just as a general kind of outline. I'll look at some of the questions and see if there's anything I can answer. There's not many people. Question about the could you please explain the correct fertilizing of Satsukis as to not alter flower colour? Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer just now. But basically, you're either fertilizing too much at the wrong time of year, or with the wrong type of fertilizer. Is pretty much everything. What differentiates a Satsuki from any other kind of azalea? The growth comes out, like with an azalea, Satsuki azalea, the new growth comes out in the spring before flowering. Whereas with a lot of others, it'll be the flowers first and then the growth. So there we go. That one's shaped a bit like a bell end. Okay, there's nothing other, obviously. Barry Tucker, how does one create a humid atmosphere for azaleas when growing here in the UK other than humidity trays? What's the best sunlight position? Okay, so basically full sun is fine with most azaleas. One of the things that we mentioned about their unnatural kind of styling into bonsai like habits is the bark isn't really supposed to be exposed to the sunlight. They're supposed to be beneath a massive canopy of foliage and throughout the year, essentially. And so when you expose the bark to intense sunlight, it will dry out, it will desiccate, and you'll end up with dead patches on it and things like that. So when you cut them back really hard and the bark is really exposed, or like a styling like this, then having them under some shade in the hottest part of the year, the hottest part of the day, is something very, very important. But if they have like this one, a full head of hair, which is transpiring, taking moisture up from the roots, taking it and sending it through the foliage, then generally full sun will be fine in the UK. They do like a high humid atmosphere, especially sick trees. So misting them a lot is basically the key. Putting them under, like on top of a lawn, just trying to raise the humidity in any way, shape or form is good. Keeping them out of the wind is something, but then you can end up with some other problems. So yes, it is important to use an acidic soil with azalea. As I said, the type of soil is great for azaleas. Is called Canema, pH 5.5, but it's the microstructure of it that's very important. But yeah, they use ericaceous soil for garden centre things. Okay. Thank you very much, Ian. Yep. And we'll just the last couple here. Mr. Gyro Flux. I messed up root pruning probably. Should I consider pruning this year or let it recover? No flowers at all or signs of growth. Let it recover. Keep the top of it misted. So just try and keep the trunk from desiccating. Try and get some moisture on it. If you start to see any sort of signs of growth, just let them go. If that doesn't happen, then chalk it up to experience. Okay. Azalea gall. It's a fungal problem. Didn't really cover it. I was going to, but I didn't get a chance to make a video. There will be a thing on. We'll cover azalea pests and diseases going forward, but really there isn't that much other than azalea gall that I've seen, other than user error. As I said. In Japan, there is a lot of problems with mites and things like that, but we don't tend to have those over here so much. A little bit of spider mite occasionally, but usually the problems that we see is user error. The gall, I had it kicking around here earlier, is a fungal problem, and you get rid of it by cutting them off as soon as you possibly can, and cleaning the areas. Lime sulfur over the winter will usually help to clear it up. Some varieties are much more susceptible than others. Hoshino Kageyaki, which is one of my favourite varieties, is chronic for it, but other varieties will get it if particularly bad years, if you get a certain sort of set of climatic conditions at the wrong time of year. So in early spring, if there's a lot of humidity, a lot of moisture flying around, the spores get transported and stuff like that. Are you getting into propagation today? Nope. Can I use strike cuttings? Yes, they are a very, very quick and easy way to easy variety to take cuttings. put it in some soil. Are they hardy for a UK winter? Yes, as long as the temperatures don't go down below -5. Realistically, the thing that we said about the exposed bark for the sun is equally applicable for the cold. No more questions. I need a drink. Is equally applicable for the cold because they have such thin bark. They don't have that protective bark that say pines do. When the air temperature is like -5 and below for prolonged periods of time, there's just like a micron thick, so we're talking very, very thin barrier between the moisture that's in the trunk, just directly underneath there, and the air and the azaleas don't really kind of like have the same kind of like antifreeze type properties that a lot of the other species do. They don't need that in the wild. They just die off and keep regenerating themselves, or they cover them. So, you know, they're designed to be covered in that massive sort of shell of foliage and stuff like that. And so if the temperature drops below -5, then they do tend to kind of like you can sort of see them suffer a little bit. But it's that kind of real prolonged period that can be an issue. So generally, they will be okay. But sort of doing things like making sure that you don't water them late in the day during the winter, and there's like moisture on the actual trunks themselves, and things like that will help to kind of like mitigate any of those problems. So right, on that bombshell, I think we're going to call it a day, because and yeah, it was a bit raw. It would have been nice to have had the camera running, like I say, it was the test. But yeah, it's basically kind of like a big introduction to what azaleas are and things like that, and so I won't have to repeat myself all the time. But it is, like I say, a real kind of weird niche market of bonsai, and I cannot stress the importance of the horticultural aspect of it enough. Making sure they're really well watered, really well fertilized, and rejuvenated is the key to any success. Once you've got that, once you've got them growing like this, you can style them so easily. They bud from anywhere. You can cut them back hard. They're easy enough to wire. The new shoots and stuff like that. It's just really easy. The difficulty is the horticultural side of it. So we'll take that into the next stream. I don't know if it'll be the next one, because we've got a few other things to look at as well. But there will be a lot of kind of like heavy pruning, light pruning, styling, repotting coming up over the next couple of weeks. So if anybody does have any sort of specific questions about azaleas, please do put them on the back of a postcard and post them in, so to speak. If you are a donor, then please either respond to the email that got sent out, or join the Discord group, and can kind of like look at answering those questions there. If you're not a donor, these streams are free, obviously. It's on YouTube, and we do ask if you found it very useful, which 57 people I think maybe have done. Is that all that's tuned in? Really not quite popular. Oh no, we've had more than that. Oh yeah, I've had quite a few. Nice. If you found it very useful and you wish to donate, then the link's gone up there. And if you do, then you get to join the club, get into the Discord group, and there will be kind of like some extra information, some videos behind in that space. So ask questions if you need them, but obviously we're going to be covering a lot of stuff going forward. And then the only other thing, you heard it on the video, on the sound, which I didn't know why that was on. But yeah, I'm going to enjoy this drink. And this today's stream has been brought to you in association with Lansdowne West Coast IPA from Bath Ales. First time I've had it, so I'm going to try and enjoy this. And may your Satsukis be well watered, heavily fertilized and rejuvenated.